name, Sridhar Ramphal, is synonymous with Caribbean public service. A conversation with one of the most durable Caribbean public servants. Don't go anywhere. Carib Nation is up next. Welcome to Carib Nation. I'm David Hines, on location in Belize City to be precise. It's always my pleasure to talk to people who make policy and make decisions at the highest level in our Caribbean society. And guess what? We've caught up with Sir Sridhar Ramphal. You must know that name. Former Foreign Minister of Guyana, Commonwealth Secretary General, Chairman of the Regional Negotiating Machinery of the Caribbean, now facilitator, OS facilitator for Belize in relation to the Belize-Guatemala territorial dispute. So Sridhar Ramphal, welcome to Carib Nation.
Thank you.
What are you doing here in Belize?
Well, indeed, I am here in Belize in an additional capacity. I'm here as Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. But of course, I can't be in Belize, but be talking with the government about the facilitation process. But essentially, I'm here on something called the Chancellor's Forum, which is a project, an enterprise put together by Professor Nettleford, the Vice Chancellor, and I, with a view to enhancing awareness throughout the Caribbean of the degree to which global issues impact on our lives and the lives of future generations of Caribbean people. In a context in which we suspect that there is not a sufficient awareness of the degree to which that impact is pertinent. So I am talking with the young people who attend the Center for Continuing Studies of the university, young undergraduates of the University of Belize. I'm talking with the private sector. I'm talking at a town hall meeting with the community, with the people of Belize about these global issues.
Mm-hmm. How important are those global issues to the Caribbean?
Absolutely crucial. Oh, we are no longer, if ever we were, I don't think we ever were, but we certainly are in no sense outside the mainstream of international happening. Nobody is anymore. We live in a world which is patently one world, interactive, interdependent. And the Caribbean, particularly with its destiny bound up with facilities like services and tourism, financial services, with its outreach to Africa, to Asia, to Europe, out of its history, the Caribbean is part of that one world. And what is happening in that world is very vital to the future of the Caribbean.
Let's go back to education. You're the Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. One of the criticisms that has been leveled at UE is that the three campuses have now become sort of national campuses and kind of moving away from the Pan-Caribbean mandate. How do you respond to such a criticism?
Well, I understand the criticism, first of all, because one of the realities is that with three campuses, the students tend to be drawn too substantially from that country. This is not a matter of policy. This is just the reality of economics. It is easier, cheaper for Jamaicans in Jamaica to go to Mona. It is easier for Trinidadians in Trinidad to go to St. Augustine, rather than to go to Mona, and so on. But the net result of that is that it has changed the character of the campuses from what, say, Mona was 40 years ago, 50 years ago at the beginning, from a truly pan-Caribbean campus in which all West Indians had to go there if they were going to the UWI at all, rather than have the option of, as it were, staying at home. So real is this that the then Minister of Education of Barbados a few years ago, Mia Motley, actually proposed to the university in its council and had it adopted that as a matter of policy, Caribbean countries and the university must work out a system in which every UWI undergraduate spends at least one semester in the 3 years in a country other than its home country, in a campus country of the region other than its home country. So the criticism is valid, the reality is understood, the university is attempting to overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to Belize and talk a little bit about that process. Yeah. There's been what I would call a lot of swift movement, certainly after years of hard work. Over the last 2 years or so, we've seen a rapid movement. Tell us where that is and your own view on how it will end up.
Well, I think it's a tremendous story in conflict resolution, for which many people must take credit. Certainly the OAS, as the regional hemispheric organization, deserves a great deal of credit for, if you like, bringing the facilitation process, the conflict resolution process under its canopy, and therefore elevating it to a higher level of urgency in terms of solutions. I think another factor of success was the innovation of its not being a negotiation between the two parties, but between facilitators on their behalf. Now, I was the facilitator for Belize. And because of that one remove resolution process, it was possible for us to make greater progress than if the parties were confronting each other on each occasion, getting annoyed with each other, breaking off the negotiations, having to start up again, and so on. The facilitators were interposed, as it were, between them. And the result was, as you say, pretty rapid progress in a 2-year period. It's not over, but we have reached initial agreement on proposals that are before both governments, and that have been negotiated through a process which involves the governments, and which now have to be ratified by referenda in both countries. Belize has just had a national election. The government has been returned. That was in some kind of way a referendum process, but they have to have a proper referendum. Guatemala is having an election later this year, and so can't get the referendum mixed up with the election, but we'll have to have a referendum process too. But meanwhile, the OAS is in the process of establishing a presence on the border between the two countries, on what we have described in the proposals as the border between Belize and Guatemala, which is substantially the line for which Belize has contended. There will be an OAS presence on that line until the whole referendum process is worked out. So I think for practical purposes, in terms of Belize, but I believe ultimately in terms of both countries, the process has already advanced the resolution of that conflict to a point of determination.
Why do you think the settlement of this problem is so important for a country like Belize?
Well, it is absolutely vital because an active territorial controversy involving your land is a controversy involving your national integrity. It is not limited to Belize and Guatemala. It is very valid, very active in relation to Guyana and Venezuela. And there are rumblings with Venezuela in other contexts in the Caribbean. What it does is to divert human and financial resources from development to, in some cases, defense. That has happened with both Guyana and Belize. So anything which takes you away from that conflict, removes a border quarrel from the agenda, allows you to devote your full attention, full resources to the real problems of development.
You're a nationalist in the sense that you serve Guyana in public life. You're an internationalist. You serve in the Commonwealth and other international organizations. But above and beyond all of that, I think that you are a regionalist. And so I want us to talk now about
right. I like the definition.
Let's talk about.
And a very good evening to you. This evening on a Tuesday evening, coming to you there, the insights and perspectives of Sir Sridhar Ramphal. One of the things I always give thanks for is not just, as it were, moving through, as they say, from little boy at boxing line top, get to move around the Caribbean, move around the world, meet people. One of the things I always say I'm blessed with is meeting people who matter. Meeting people who matter. And somebody like Sridhar Ramphal, so Sridhar Ramphal mattered. I, of course, am an independence child, and so would have grown up with the name Sridhar Ramphal as Attorney General and Minister of Foreign Affairs for Guyana, and then moving on to become Secretary General of the Commonwealth. It was a big deal. I was at school. I was just finishing school in 1975 when Sir Sridhar became the Commonwealth Secretary. It was big. It was big. And we have always in Guyana and the Caribbean had these persons who move onto the world stage and become internationalists, become regionalists, and influencing what happens in the world. So Sridhar is one of those persons, and I was lucky enough to meet him and to have an interview with him. That interview was done in 2003, that 21 years ago, in Belize City. I was there as part of a television crew, Carib Nation. Carib Nation still broadcast out of Washington, D.C. And whenever I pass through Washington, I would host a show, or sometimes they would ask me to still do a show. But in those days, we would travel to Caribbean countries, spend 2 weeks or so, and we would interview from prime minister to, ordinary men and women in the street, etc., etc. And we were there in Belize on one such visit, and the hotel that we were staying, so Sridhar was staying in the same hotel. And I happened to bump into him one morning, and I said, "So Sridhar, I'm from Guyana. My name is David Hines." And he said, "I know that name." I said, "What, you know that name?" "I know that name from politics." And we chatted, and I said, "But I'm not here doing politics. I'm here as part of a television crew. And would you be so kind as to give us an interview?" And he said, yes. Once you're from Guyana, you don't have to book. And that was in the morning, and in the afternoon, we got there. Quite a guy. I mean, it's sometimes very interesting to see these guys and these girls, women, men, outside of their official habitat. And, after the interview, we had a couple of drinks, and, I asked him some questions which I would not ask on camera, and he gave me some answers which could not. And I remember him, you know, he was very close to Burnham, very, very close to Burnham. And I think some of the best insights on Burnham I got from him from that conversation. It was not on camera, it was off camera. And I remember one of the things he said about Burnham. He said Burnham was pragmatist before pragmatism became a thing. He said when he was close to Burnham, Burnham always made sure that he out socialist Jagan. Once Jagan was the quintessential socialist, and Burnham always, according to Srinath, he out socialist Jagan, and you know. And after a period of time, if you remember, Burnham became the darling of the Cubans, not Jagan, right? Got the highest award from Cuba even before Jagan. And he said the other thing Burnham did was out African Sidney King, Kwayana, right? Kwayana was the Africanist, and he said Burnham, Burnham foreign policy towards Africa, you know? So that when you talk about the quintessential Pan-Africanist being Kwayana, you can't leave out Burnham because he's there with the Pan-Africanist policy. And when you talk about Jagan being the quintessential socialist, you can't leave out Burnham, because Burnham said, I'm a Marxist-Leninist by 1974. And that's that insight from Srinath on Burnham really meant a lot to me. And there were other things we talked about. But as you know, Srinath passed away this past week to his family and his extended family. Our condolences go out to him. As is the case with these public personalities, they're controversial. There was a time the PPP hated Ramphal. They didn't want to hear his name. He was a Nimakaran because, of course, he was supportive of Burnham, right? Later on, some of the Burnham people had a problem because when the PPP came to power, Ramphal was rehabilitated. That's a good book, and so forth. And you know, these guys really, in order to get where they got to, it was never a smooth sailing and seamless. There was always controversy. So one may not say that Ramphal was controversial. I think you leave that kind of tack for people like David Hines and so on, right? Ramphal wasn't controversial in that sense, but he was not a straight-laced chap. He was not universal love for him. The early love for him was from one side of the population, and the later love for him was for the other side of the population. 1997, he was very integral to the Hordmanston Accord. It was he who organized for the three wise men to come. Alistair McIntyre, Sir Henry Ford, and himself came and brokered that agreement. And he was able to do that because he knew both sides. He knew the PNC and he knew the PPP, you see? And by that time, the PPP was claiming him from an ethnic standpoint, not necessarily because he never shared their politics. But so Srinath Ramphal dead at 95, the passing of, we have to say, the passing of a Guyanese and Caribbean icon. Tonight, we are going to be talking about a number of things. GHK Lall is here, and we are going to be talking about the half-year report, the half-yearly report. Some interesting revelations in that report. We are also going to be talking about something that has the government on its high horse. You know, one of the things about governments, and I think um, I'm talking about Professor Borti Ramcharan, who is no hater of the PPP. He's not. He's not. In fact, if you ask me, I would say he's partial to the PPP. But he made an observation that there are shades of autocracy. He also criticized the PNC. He said they are given to rigging elections. All right, what's new? Um, and he said there's shades of autocracy from the PPP government. And you all would know that term autocracy. It's used a lot by one of our contributors here, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, who said this government is an autocracy. And Dr. Ramcharan, in an article in the Fabric News, said there are shades of autocracy. Now, this is not coming from me. It's not coming from GHK Lall. It's not coming from the PNC. It's coming from someone who cannot be described as hostile, cannot be described as controversial. He's an international public servant like Sridhar Ramphal. And he made the observation. He made this observation. Oh boy, the PPP has gone after him. You will think that he's an outcast. He's an outcast. But that's when you know a government is sinking to its lowest. And in a letter today, Dr. Ramcharan hinted at that. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit and what that means, because there is something about when people with Ramcharan status say some things. Now, like I said, Henry Jeffrey has been talking about autocracy. Lall has been talking about autocracy. So many of us have been talking about autocracy. But when somebody like Bertrand Ramcharan, an international public servant, says it, it has a different ring to it. We're still, as Lloyd Bess would say, it's the doctor politics. When the doctors speak, meaning when the educated elite speak, it carries a little extra zing to it. Good evening to all of you. Please share the link, please share the live, and let everyone know we are ready tonight with Brother GHK Lall. GHK, my brother, good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening, everyone. Good to be here.
I imagine the name Sridhar Ramphal is a household name to you. Certainly, of course, your generation. And as someone who has been paying keen attention to Guyanese and Caribbean politics, you can't miss that name. Sridhar Ramphal, he passed away this past week. Your thoughts on what he represents in the larger scheme of things, Guyanese and Caribbean.
Again, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here sharing with you. Thanks for the opportunity and the call, Dr. Hines. So Sridhar Ramphal, Guyanese man, Caribbean icon, son of Guyana, hero of Guyana. It seems that he was always in the right place and among the right people, and that he did the right things that got him into some different spaces. You mentioned the word controversial. He was not controversial. Neither was he, like Dr. Ramcharan, confrontational. These guys are not controversial nor confrontational. He was a contributor, and he was more than that. He was a player. He was a player. There's a certain fluidity about him that took him to the places that he went. The Latins of old had a statement. It rings, it resonates with us. Do mortuis nil nisi bonum. Of the dead speaking only good. And of our dear departed brother, we will speak only good tonight. And sometimes we speak too much good. And we forget that we are all flawed human beings in our different ways. He had his flaws. I prefer to remember him, and I've written something about him that may not go over well, but it's interesting how the PPP has embraced him. I was surprised that His Excellency the President and the Honorable Attorney General came out gushing on the announcement, on the news of his passing. And I reared back and I said, wait, what am I missing? This can't be happening. They're talking about a Borno man. They're talking about an Indian man with a PNC group. But there it was. And it is an indication of Sir Sridat's fluidity, and I use that word again, in our political sphere, that at one time he was there on the PN, he was there recognized by the PNC as one of our own. And now the PPP, who looked upon him as more than an adversary, maybe an Indian traitor, could come around now in 2024 at his passing and say, I thought it was good, maybe a little bit overdone, and say he was a good man. He was a great Guyanese. Personally, I recognize that Sir Sridat knew what it took to get his message across, and at the same time, get himself further up the ladder. He was pretty good at that. Listen, when he became Commonwealth Secretary General, I was a little boy. I was a young man, sorry. And that was groundbreaking. So he paved the way for all of those, in some respects, for all of those West Indian men and women who we hear are part of the British cabinet, and who's a baroness, and who's an MP, and whether opposition or government in the UK. And I'm saying, and other public servants, international public servants, and I'm saying he really did some groundbreaking work. The PNC came out and said, well, look, he's done well, and we hail him for that. So again, I think he has made his contributions. He's left his imprint on the history of Guyana and the region, and it's a big one. It's a big one. To his people, we share the condolences at this time. It's never easy, no matter 25 or 95. But he had a full life. He had a full life, and I hope that some people will give up the bitterness that we hold on to. I was glad to see, and we will come to this in a minute, I was glad to see the president making the comments that he did on the passing of former foreign minister, former attorney general, former minister of justice, all of Guyana, former Commonwealth Secretary General, and all those other titles, high titles that he held during his career. I was glad to see that. And it's at odds with what we're going to talk about just now. There's that fluidity again, that flexibility that is so lacking in this country.
So lacking in this country. And of course, Sridat Ramphal is one of the last of that generation born in the 1920s and before, and who were Guyanese public servants. He is gone at 95. Quayana is 99, moving on to 100, and I think he's the last of the public servants. Hamilton Green is still in his 80s. He's around, but he's still in his 80s. The Ramphals, the Burnhams, the Hoyts, the Quayanas, the Ashton Chase, Martin Carter, they all born in the 1920s and before. Jagan was born in 1917, 1918. And so in that sense, I mean, he is one of the last of that generation. Quayana is probably still the only one around that is still alive in his 90s. So we're really seeing the last of that, for us, that big generation. The Americans talk about, what they call them, the um,
Greatest.
yes, the
Greatest.
greatest generation, the World War II generation and so on. And in many regards, that generation, the Burnham, Jagan, Quayana, Sridhar Ramphal generation, are so important to us in Guyana and the Caribbean, largely because they ushered in independence for us, and they still remain that generation. I mean, the amount of beat up a Burnham got, yet you walk around this country and there are people young and old still revere him, right? Despite all the beat up, he was a dictator, he was a this, he was a that, and so on. But people revere him, still think, still hold him as the standard by which you measure. Jagan, in some quarters in the Indian community, didn't like the fact that he was a socialist, he was a communist, and so on and so forth. But you talk to the average Indian person, he's next to God. I have gone into Indian homes on the quarantine. Well, in the days when the WPA organized in those communities, and you would have the Indian deity, the Hindu deity, hanging there, and next to it Jagan. And in some instances they had Gandhi. But if it was two, it was the deity and Jagan. If it's three, the deity, Jagan, Gandhi. All right? For a man who's a communist, for a man who was not a Hindu, who was an atheist, Indian people saw him as God. And I had a chance the other night. I was on a program with Ravi Dev and them, and I had to tell them, don't scandal Jagan, because they give the impression that Jagan wasn't concerned about Indian people. Jagan was concerned about Indian people. Jagan wrote in Forbidden Freedom of the condition of Indians. Jagan wrote to the United Nations talking about Indians being treated badly in Guyana. As late as the 1980s, Jagan been talking about Indians being second-class citizens. Agree with him or not, the fact of the matter, to give the impression that Jagan didn't have an Indian narrative, he didn't stand up. They're lying in order to make a point, all right? You see? Jagan, for all his atheism, for all his communism, he stood up for Indian people. Maybe not in the way Ravi Dev and them wanted him to talk about Indian supremacy. He didn't talk about that. And perhaps that's what they wanted him to talk about. He didn't talk about Indian supremacy, but he talked about the Indian narrative of suffering. He represented, and then they lie on that man by saying that he didn't have an Indian narrative. Not true. And Indian people saw him next to God. This was not on the agenda for us to talk about, but your comments, GHK Lall.
Well, look at it. Burnham has been gone for almost 40 years. 40 years. That's an eternity, and Jagan is gone for about over 25. And we still speak of those two men in hushed terms,
Yes.
in odd terms. And I think I go back to what I said about Sir Sridhar, that as flawed as they were were heroes to countless Guyanese in their times, and their memory, and this is not nostalgia, and the impressions they've left, that they've created, have lingered, I would say, as deeply as when they were here. You can't separate some people, Indian and including some black people, from Jagan. And you can't separate black people from all that, and I think a few Indians, from what Burnham represented. Just for a moment, a little longer here off topic. Sridhar Ramphal is gone, and we have Quayana approaching 100 and Hamilton Green approaching 90. Look at these guys. They're not as prolific as before, but at that advanced age, they are still part of the public conversation. Not because they hate the PPP, or you hate the PPP, or I do, and we are not near to them in years. It's because we love this country. And somebody's got to understand that is that because they care about this country and love the people of this country, that they still want to make their voices heard. That is why Burnham and Jagan's voice, whether we like them or not, still intrude, maybe even dominate at times our conversations. That is why they resonate to this day and will continue to resonate. And I think that speaks so, so illuminatingly of the contributions of these two men, and to a lesser extent of Sir Sridhar, to the in the annals of Guyana.
So Sridhar Ramphal, Burnham, Jagan, Quayana, that generation still resonates with us. And any society identifies with that which it thinks and feels is the best that it has produced. That's where the whole notion of identity comes from. What you identify with. What do you identify with? And if Indian Guyanese did not believe that Jagan represented them, that Jagan reflected their cries, their aspirations, they would not support him in the way they support him. They had to feel that he was representing them. And so when the Ravidevs of this world try to tell us that Jagan didn't have an Indian narrative, they can go to hell because they're lying. Jagan did not have an Indian supremacist narrative. He didn't. He wasn't an Indian supremacist, you know. It doesn't mean that from time to time he would not have made statements that Africans would have found uncomplimentary, but he was not an Indian supremacist. And I think that's where the Ravidevs and them got it wrong. Jagan was concerned about Indians. He represented Indians. As I said on the program, Jagan, if you ask me, I would refer to him as an Indian Guyanese communist, an Indian communist. Let's move on, Brother GHK Lall. So, Bertrand Ramcharan, much like Sridhar Ramphal, international public servant, made this comment in the Stabroek News in a column in which he said, this government is reflecting shades of autocracy. Now, a few years ago, Coffee 250 came out and said, this government is an emerging apartheid state. It's an emerging. Dr. Ramcharan said that there are shades of autocracy. Now, the response of the government, as we can remember, to the charges of apartheid, well, we are not like South Africa, which of course is insulting our intelligence, you know, because unless you are the identical state as South Africa was during the period of apartheid, then you're not apartheid. Our laws in Guyana are not apartheid laws, so we cannot be an apartheid state, an emerging apartheid state. And we saw here with Dr. Ramcharan, we heard the PPP making the same point. What is Ramcharan talking about? How can we be an autocracy? We are a democracy. And then we saw somebody like Mr. Ramcharan. I was just about to say Boise, that's his father. Ralph Ramcharan, this weekend, taking the same line. Well, our laws, you know, don't suggest that we are an autocracy. And I think Ralph, who is usually very perceptive on these issues, I think miss the point that Dr. Ramcharan was making. Miss the point that he was making. He was very careful, shades of autocracy. GHK, help us to put in context what Dr. Ramcharan was telling us.
As I said before, Dr. Ramcharan is not the kind of contributor, commentator that seeks to attract the kind of attention that he got. He wants a conversation. He wants us to think. It's okay to disagree with him. It's okay to challenge him. In democracy, there is more than a toleration for views that we don't agree with. There is an appreciation for that. Because if we were to parse through it, as difficult as that may be, it helps us to go from A to B, sometimes reluctantly. In an autocracy, let's hold off on shades for a moment. In an autocracy, it is what I say goes. The tolerance is gone, the appreciation is gone, whereas one is about toleration. Autocracy is about oppression and suppression. And that is what we saw in response to this thoughtful, and I thought profound Guyanese, by democracy versus autocracy, shades of autocracy. Like you said, very careful. Coffee 250 spoke of emerging state of apartheid in this country. I call both what Coffee 250 group said and Dr. Ramcharan not emerging, not shade, but creeping. Perhaps we are ending up in the same place. Creeping autocracy. Dr. Ramcharan suffers from the handicap of not living here full time. Am I correct, Dr. Hines?
Yes.
Yeah, he doesn't. So he spoke about, is it Applebaum? And
yes, Applebaum.
Yeah,
yeah, he quoted
yes,
from
that.
Professor
Yes.
Applebaum. Yeah.
Look at our story. The president responded and he said, "We have been the most transparent government of all. We have been the most inclusive government of all. We have been the most community-oriented government of all." And further, nobody says not. That's not a democracy. That's not a democratic leader in action and responding thoughtfully to something that challenges his hegemony on thinking. The president has arrogated to himself, and I'm sorry to use these words, he has seized unto himself the exclusive right to think what should apply here. So the man said his shades of autocracy, and I'm saying, to hell with you. Look at all these things we're doing. Is the president for real? Is President Ali for real? That's what I want to ask him and ask his people close to him. I see the president as a fantasist, a contortionist, and an illusionist. Fantasist, he's not living in the world of reality. A contortionist where he twists things to suit his narrative or his story. And an illusionist where he drags out these rabbits out of white rabbits out of hats, and dangles them and say, this is what it is, when the reality is stark and ominous and clashes directly with what he is saying. Today is September 4th, isn't it? Yes. Let's go back slightly over a month ago. Emancipation Day, the celebration, National Park, New Amsterdam. In a democracy, a government would be benevolent instead of belligerent. Democracy is about benevolence. Autocracy is about belligerence. And what we got is the response we got from the president to Dr. Ramcharan. Plus, going back to that Emancipation Day celebration, and we got some more coming up, they have to have a parallel celebration. The government had to have it was only feel secure if it has a parallel celebration, as opposed to absorbing the sacredness of the day and say, and all that went before, and all the sacrifices that were made before, and say, you know what? The least we can do is participate in this as opposed to try to distract from it and to diminish from what has always been there for what, almost 3 decades now? Dr. Hans, 3 decades? Yes. Good. That's one. I look at it, Padaji. All kinds of slurs were hurled against the people in charge. Smears, slanders. That's not a democracy in action. If it's buttressed by the facts about fraud and improper accounting and all of this, then bring it out and deal with these people. But when you try to drive a wedge so that your narrative will prevail, that your objectives will supersede all other objectives, then where is the democracy in that? Where is the willingness? Where is the willingness to be tolerant, to be welcoming to what could make us better, to what has its own role to play in a multifaceted Guyanese community? Interestingly, there's was it Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the president goes and makes a speech. And he's good at making speeches. And as a matter of fact, he likes to make these speeches, not realizing that they are sober-minded people who are listening to him and say, but wait, boss, nothing in matching in reconciling with reality. Dialogue and inclusion. You can't tell me about dialogue and inclusion when we don't have that, the government reaching out to the opposition, when the government reaches out repeatedly to the opposition and say, in this time in the history of Guyana, we need to close ranks. We need to be side by side and shoulder to shoulder. Instead is, no, we are going to squeeze you and we are going to suppress you and we are going to make sure that you are aware of our compulsion and our addiction to domination, total domination. And if that sounds like shades of Dr. Henry Jeffrey, I take a bow to him. Now, if we can't talk to the major opposition representing close to half of the electorate, then where's the democracy there? Why is it that it has to be my way, my highway, and no other way? That's not a democracy, that's autocracy. That, to me, is the authoritarianism of Benito Mussolini of the 20th century, repeating itself, I will think, I believe, and I will say, in the person of our president in the 21st century, in Guyana today. Right, I'll take this further. Parliament, this is where Ramcharan went. Our parliamentary committees are being made into a mockery. They're reduced to formality, there's no quorum, the rules have been changed, people are absent, and then you come up with this construction that in our time we had more meetings. Why is it we're always dealing in the past? Mm-hmm. Let us deal in the present so that we can open a way for the future. That's democracy, always looking for the dissenting views, for that second pair of eyes that can take us to another rung up the ladder. I think that Dr. Ramcharan was very cautious, shades of autocracy. And in his letter today, he said, look, all I want to do was to make a contribution to the conversation. Perhaps I'm not saying that as accurately as I should.
Well, it's accurate. That's what I
Yes.
think that's what
And
he's saying in that letter. Yeah.
and what he said, the one that struck me straight in the jugular, and I didn't expect him to say it. As a matter of fact, I didn't expect him to say anything. He said, "It is instructive, my words, it is instructive at the response to what I put out there, democracy versus autocracy, shades of autocracy from government, the government side, government agents. I mean, I can only imagine the vitriol and the vehemence that was hurled at this man for utilizing one of the freedoms of democracy, which was to have the freest expression, the most expansive expression that he's capable of, for what, if listened to, if followed up on, if taken to heart and said, we've been going about this thing wrong, so we should make these little adjustments or these big ones or these continual ones so we can have a better Guyana. I mean, the moment you know that, Dr. Hines, you know that about me, and I know that about me and some others. What we are saying here is looked upon as the work of the devil, as as though you are this sworn enemy of the state. The moment I become an enemy of this state, or of the American state to which we belong to a lesser degree, at least I do, then it is time for me to stop being a public contributor. It's time for me to stop sharing with the people that I care about. What we are trying to do is to say, man, what we've got here is not working, and it's not by the slightest margins. It's got some wide voids, and it's hurting us. Therefore, let us listen. Let us not try to shout out the voices. Let us not try to intimidate into silence. Not us just try to have one voice with one thought from one set of people for one objective. That is, we are going to control the thought processes, we are going to control your minds, and we are going to control the environment. That is an autocracy. That's more than shades of autocracy. I think we have gone past shades of autocracy. I think we have gone past emerging autocracy. They will say, "But you can speak." But why do I have to speak? And part of the consequence of that is to be brutalized for it. Why is it when the Honorable Vice President of Guyana, he likes to call himself Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, our brother, why is it that when he is on, he's incited his people to take to social media, he's got a virtual troll farm on social media waiting to take his words and to add combustion to them, to pour flames over to them. In some of the viciousness, I am not on social media, some of the viciousness that has been shared with me about what they do to people that disagree with them. In a democracy, in a healthy democracy, in a vibrant democracy, there is a welcoming to dissenting views. The president says, "Oh, I'm all for constructive criticism." Part of what he refuses to acknowledge, he does not get to define what is constructive and what is criticism. He does not get to define that. With due respect to the office of the presidency, he is subject to that criticism just like anybody else. And I think it behooves the president, as the national leader, to listen, to absorb, and to act upon what he is hearing. Can't act on everything. But this man spoke about shade of autocracy, and it's there. It's there because look at the media. They try to sabotage the media. They try to restrict the PPP government. Works overtime to overwhelm, to intrude, and then overwhelm the independent media and the few independent voices, and to snuff it out so that there is this one dominant narrative that is so distant, so far removed from reality. And that's our problem here. So listen, I am not going to quibble. I'm not going to soft pedal this or sugarcoat this. We are past the state of shades of autocracy, and I think that we are living with it. And it just unless the government is willing to listen, unless the government is willing to extend its arms and encircle the people who are saying to it, you're going about this thing wrong. The governance is not clean. The leadership is not transformational. The environment is not united. There's no oneness about it. So let us be sober. Let us be honest with ourselves for once, and let us face up to that reality. And this is the worst thing that can happen to us now in what is supposed to be the best time of our lives. This is where the government could really earn its spurs. This is where the government, the president, the vice president, the entire apparatus of the government could show, look, we are willing to listen. We are willing to make adjustments, but let us meet in the middle and let us go from there. There is no meeting. It's got to be my way, my agenda, my objectives, and my domination of the conversation. That's not democracy. That is autocracy.
And we will let Dr. Ramcharan as the last say. He ended his letter today this way. He said the army of reactions in various parts of the media do a disservice to the government, which should maintain a dignified posture. A classic method of autocracy
Yes.
is to deploy undignified hitmen to cow people into fear. The government might wish to think about the image these hitmen are giving it.
I think that was beautifully said, powerfully said. I couldn't have said it better. It was very low-keyed, but I'll tell you, it was fiery.
Fiery.
It was deep, without raising his voice, without making waves. That thing was profound. What that last part there. In other words, what he's saying to the government, to the leadership, isn't it time that you change direction? Isn't it time that you call off your dogs? Isn't it time that you stop sicking your dogs at Guyanese who only want the best for this country? This is what our objectives are. Let us work together. But we're not hearing this. We are not hearing it. From the moment you say something that sounds a little different, looks a little different, is a little different from the dominant narrative, you are the worst thing around.
Brother GHK Lall here tonight, and we are, of course, addressing a number of issues. GHK, the annual mid-year report shows that the GDP has grown by 49.7% for the first half of this year. It shows that 113.5 million barrels of oil was produced in the first half of 2024, which means that the oil and gas sector has grown by 67.1% in the first half of 2024. My brother, staggering numbers. You're talking there about the first world economy. Those numbers. America would give anything to get a 49.7% growth. Anything. America and China talking about 5 and 6% growth. We are talking about 49% growth. But we just had CSEC. And we are talking about a drop from 34% to 31% passing math. We are talking about 50% of our population living on $5.50 US, which is 1,100 Guyana dollars. 50% of our people living on 1,100 Guyana dollars per day. We are talking about a dropout rate of close to 50% from our schools. Our economy, our GDP has grown 49.7%, almost 50%. We have produced 113.5 million barrels of oil, which is a 67.1% growth in the first half of this year. The economy is scheduled to grow by 56.4% by the end of this year, up from 44.7% last year. Dazzling numbers, dazzling numbers. GHK, if I go to Boxing Baghdad side, or Golden Grove Market Square, or Big Market or Border Market in Georgetown, or I go over to New Amsterdam and go down the Clay Brick Road, and I read those numbers to people, or for that matter, if I go into Enmore or Enterprise or Port Morant, don't talk about the hinterland, and read those numbers, people are going to suck their teeth. Am I wrong?
I think you're lucky they don't run you out of tongue. I mean, I would say, is where you come from, man. Which planet you come from with them thing where you think in here. But the fact is, those numbers are real. You said that the United States would give an arm and a leg on China to be at 49%. They'll give an arm and a leg to be at 9%, my brother.
There you go.
At 9, we are talking about tepid and lukewarm growth of about 3 and 4 and 5%. China, look, if I go back in memory, the Asian tigers in their best days, we're not talking about 49%. Singapore and South Korea, they weren't talking about those numbers. These numbers are in the stratosphere. 39%, 49, make it 29%. Take out 20, make it 29%. And we still, Guyana still is a world beater with its half-year GDP. But we're not talking about 29, we're talking about 49.7%. Oh God, I'm sorry folks. Sometimes I get a little carried away. That number, half of that number, should mean something to the people in all those villages that you talked about, meaning that it carries them. Meaning that it carries them. Meaning, there's a saying that we have in America, and I think you're pretty familiar with it, Dr. Hines. A rising tide lifts all boats. It will live in one boat and two boats, and a part of the fleet that on they tie up. It lifting all the boats. Therefore, what I'm saying by process of extrapolation is 29, 39, 49%. 49 is where we there. 49.7. Oh man, that ain't got to mean. Let me go down and talk about this in raw rank terms, Creole Guyanese terms. 49%. That ain't got to mean something to a pensioner, a minimum wage worker, a teacher, a nurse, a public servant, a police officer, police rank. Why are these numbers not translating to what Melinda Janke said, some prosperity for Guyana, for Guyanese? Why are they just numbers? as though they are concepts, as though they are textbook calculations. These are real numbers. 113 million barrels of oil in 6 months. And we still talking about cost of living every week in Stabrook News on Monday, part 89 or 90 or whatever it is now. You go to every one of those villages, and at no time, if I recall accurately, Dr. Hines and listeners, viewers, has there been one village, one visit, where, and I could be corrected here, where most of the people out of the 10 that are interviewed say, well, I'm doing pretty good, I'm managing, I could cope with prices, and we are able to pull our own weight and walk on our own feet, etc. No. The most of the people, and these are not partisan people, this is not a political campaign. This is, where are you in a rich oil producing country that the world is talking about in these glowing terms? The richest people in the world, the richest per capita, the richest per GDP, the richest blah, blah, blah. All these, you twist it, turn it this way, 6 ways to Sunday, you're coming back to the same thing. We are on top of the world statistically. Then why am I hungry? Why, Dr. Hines? After 49% GDP got to carry somewhere. When the economies of China and India were in high single digits, you know what was the fear of? Overheating, an overheating economy. We are not talking about, we're talking we are going to 56%. We're talking we're going to go to 56%. And don't be surprised if there's some calculation towards October, late October, that says, well, you know what? We're going to go closer to 60% because all the stars are lined up. What is this doing for people who can't buy food? What does this mean for people who can't buy medicine? All the infrastructure money. How is it, as a Guyanese, that I am still waiting for the $36,000 come the first week in the month, because I done shot after collecting that money 1-2 weeks after? No matter how a pinch, how a scrimp, how a skimp, all them kind of thing. No, 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 no. I would think if you go back to Enmore and Buxton and New Amsterdam and Enmore and wherever, and you talk to the people in the poor sections, they will say to you, well, them number there, you must imagine them. You imagine them and you making fool out of you, right? I don't think they understand. They may not understand about GDP, etc. But the bottom line here, Dr. Hines and our listeners, is that I am saying half of that GDP has got to mean something material for the regular Guyanese man, woman, and family. And it is not. The government likes to jump on its bandwagon and holler, but it's not like we ain't do nothing. Look at how much we do. Subsidy and handout and this sector. But then you mention education. Look, 10%,
10%.
10%, and then
Almost 50% growth. And
yes,
you give teachers 10%.
10%, then 8, and then 9, and feel that you are the epitome of generosity, right? That I'm heroic in what I've extended to you. After I give up, was it 2-3 years without getting anything?
5 years.
5 years without getting
19,
anything.
20, 21, 22, and 23.
5 years.
5 years.
Right. So if you do that 5 years and you average it over 10%, I get 2% a year.
2%, it's 2% a year.
Yeah, it's 2% a year.
Right? And if you add in this 2024, it's 6 years, 10%. It's less than 2%.
It's less than 2%. So, I mean, look, we got to stay calm here and speak in controlled tones. It's a public. But these are the kind of things that make you want to shed all the civility in you and to Lego some cuss word.
Yes.
Right? Because look, people make out of plastic, right? This is flesh and blood people, and Guyanese are hurting. So you got a 50% GDP. You got the prospects of even more in the next several months. And we are talking, and even into the other years coming up, because the production is going to go up. And you're saying, well, look, we are concerned, we are managing the economy and we are concerned about inflation and so on and so forth. And so this is what we could afford. But you can afford all these other things, all those monies that are spent on infrastructure. As it is said, if you don't spend, you can't thief. Right? So it comes back to that. So we could game the system that we can utilize the power that is vested in us in a democracy to behave in a manner that is more reminiscent of autocracy. 10% is not shade of autocracy. 10% is autocracy per se. 10% is autocracy. This is what it is. Take it or leave it. This is what we can give you, and we can stuff it down your throat. And this is exactly what happened under the cover dark. And this is what you gotta live with. And you know what? Does show you who in charge. And that is the conduct. That is the standard of autocrats. And that prevails in an autocracy. So let's compress this. At 50%, 49.7% GDP, ladies and gentlemen, we should not be having this kind of conversation. We should not be talking about needs in this country. We should not be talking about shortage. We should not be talking about Guyanese who. Oh, and by the way, the 49.7% is not in isolation, because we've had numbers pretty dazzling and glittering like these before in 23 and 22, etc. So, I mean, these are authoritative numbers. And here it is, we're almost like a tale of numbers and a tale of woes, right? Because we have public servants are waiting to see what's going to happen to them, and they're being dangled on a string. And the teachers that were vilified, they were demonized, they were ostracized, and then they got 10% for their troubles. After 5 months or something like that, in rain and sun. And you said, well, you look at how good we have been to you. That's what autocrats do. That's what an autocracy is about, right? We cannot have all of these profusions of numbers, and our people are struggling with poverty. $5.50 US, $1,100 a day to live on what?
Two beers.
To buy what?
Two beers.
Yeah.
2 banks.
Yep. Well, I hope you pay the water bill so you can get a little water for wash them down. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what it comes to. One wrong trip with the minibus, I think I said it here before, and the money done.
The money done. The $1,100 done.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's close to half of the people in this country live. I mean, this is not a shame. This is a disgrace.
Disgrace.
Leader in charge of an economy that is at this stupendous, mind-boggling level, and you're like, well, you're too damn greedy. Look at how much we do for you. And no, the equity and the parity, and I'm using those words loosely, have not been where they should be with the people who own this wealth, the people who are partners in this patrimony. They have been put not even on the back burner. They have been put in the backyard. They've been put in the backyard. We can get to you. And by elections coming up, they can get to you. But you might have a series of that. So because people forget easily, the masses forget easily. So use the money wisely. Spread it across. Do a less with all these projects. Look at it. We're going on build another bridge. We're going on build some high span bridge across the border. This one can barely hold its own. It doesn't have the volume of traffic. The bridge doing well, meaning in terms that it ain't like the Demerara Harbor Bridge.
Big wear and tear.
It wear and tear and it going down and it fully depreciated and it dep on its last legs and so on. No. So you got so much money, you get stupidity, you don't know what to do with yourself. Well, I can tell you what to do with yourself. Well, I'll tell this to the government. The money man, the policy man, the leader man, I want to tell you. take some of that money, we can afford it, and set it aside for the people in Guyana that could really, who are most in need of it. Straight out of the scripture, straight out of my doctrines. People in Guyana are hurting. They need relief. They need government to share the oil largesse, and so they can feel, they can know and experience what it is to be an oil producing, a citizen in an oil producing country.
GHK, I tell you, I have over the years developed this habit, which I think sends some of my friends crazy. If we gonna take a little drink or go and eat something, I would tell them, let we go buy them little tree. By Big Red, she gets a little shop and she's selling she thing there, or go down back down side by Patsy, or go by Sonia, and so on. And the reason I do that, I rather than going to the big shop them and thing, is that in recent times I've been walking out in my head. When they sell a beer, a bottle of beer, they can't be making more than $200 at most. Maybe $100 when they buy from the wholesale and then get it. And I am saying, if you're making $200 for beer, and I think that is probably too much, but I'm saying just say they make a $200 beer. You sell a case of beer, there's a $5,000. You get it? You got to sell 2 cases of beer to carry home $10,000. You got to sell 4 cases of beer in order to carry home $20,000, which is $100 US. All right? You won't pay yourself yet for your labor, right? Because you know you got to pay for your labor, all right? And so on. I'm saying, but these ladies, because they're mostly women, how they're surviving? That thing keep knocking in my ears all the time. And I am convinced that politicians either, because they don't go to a corner shop and buy the story, they don't understand what those people have to go through to make a couple dollars when the night finish or when the afternoon finish. They have no sense of what those people are taking home, you know? Or even if they know, they don't care. How can you watch your people, watch women come out in front of a dance and then from 10 o'clock in the night to 3, 4 in the morning to sell a couple of cases of beer, to go home and look after the children? And you can look at that and say how you are doing well by your people. Oh, you know, all they have to do is to, even if they don't want, put on a mask. Put on mask or something so people won't notice you. And go in front of one of these stands and observe how these people struggle to make a penny. To make a penny. You know? And I am so, as you say, my mouth big more than you own. So I am given to going off. And so on. But I get so angry. When I look at those things and you know the way in which they cost poor people. And I give I tell the story here so many times that half of the people I say, man, come, you want to beer? Would pull me one side, GHK, and said, David, me I want beer. I said, you don't drink beer? Yes, I just drink beer, but I don't want beer. Give me the money. They're going to buy something for going to cook tomorrow. And the price comes in. They say, David, don't give me easy, don't let us see. What you are seeing there is our poor people are not irresponsible as we think they are. They make choices. They just drink beer. But tell me, David, me I want beer. Give me the money for go home and cook. Give me that money to go home and cook. And I am saying our people are suffering. And not that they're suffering in silence All you have to do is to go through any village. Those of us who come from America or come out of the bush, we can splurge and so on. But people who have to, and they're mostly women, who have to deal with that day-to-day thing, they are feeling the squeeze. I'm telling you, I have cried so many tears, so much tears, so many tears, my brother, over these last couple of years, because these are people that I know. Some of them I grew up with, I got to school with, you know. That's some of them that their children, you know. And when you see poor people going through that kind of thing in a country that we are licking down money, like it's going out a style. We're building all kind of roads which broke up after 2 months, 3 months. That is where we are spending our money, and our people are suffering, and nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care about them overcoming the suffering, but nobody seems to care that one day those people are going to blow up, because human beings are not made to go through that kind of pressure when they look around and see what other people doing with money. I mean, Dr. Ramcharan is so on point, autocratic, and heartless. That is what. Oh, you're going to look at teachers. I mean, look. All you have to do is watch teachers going out to work yesterday. They dress up so nice. Most of them are women. They can't go to school looking like a orangutan. We men sometimes can get off looking little raggedy. Women, they gotta look nice. They gotta smell nice. 10% on 100,000. On 100,000. Come on, man. Come on. Come on. Come on. And you expect people to be silent and telling them, oh, we're going to cross over. So you are punishing people, and you expect them to vote for you while you're punishing, which means they're not human beings. Because if you're punishing people and you expect them to vote for you, yes, your natural constituency will vote for you for reasons of affinity and reasons of, kinship and so on, right? But you are now saying that those who you are punishing more than necessary, that they will vote for you, which means you don't think they're human beings. GHK has said enough. Talk to me.
Some of the images that stick in my head is, let's start back from where you think you go to the corner shop. When I used to come here every year, for decades, I used to ask my friend, I say, I want to go to Pegasus. We had all these other places. I said, no, man, we kind of shop people. We's village shop people. And you want to give back to your people the little prosperity that you get. You want to share it, because when you sit down in that little shop, they treat you like a king. There's one. And you're able to spread the wealth to those who come in and saying, how much for this, how much for that?
Yeah.
And you realize as they're going down the scale, the money in reach. So you gotta be a heartless whatever for sit down there drinking your Heineken or Banks beer or whatever and tell you and pretend not to hear and pretend to be so engrossed in the conversation that you won't hear and you won't care. You got to get up and say what they want. If it's too sweetie, give them. And by the way, you ain't got a half pint of ice cream, give them a little galan. Or you understand me? You want to be careful with the ladies. You don't want to say you get too fresh or something for somebody take the rock. But the fact of the matter is that people were in need then, and they are more in need now because the prices have run away from them. I used to go to the Meadowbank Wharf, the fish place.
I just go there too.
And I'm looking there. I am going there at 5:45. The dawn is receding. And you got these women there buying these bucket of banga meal, and
Yes.
they're waiting for get it fillet. You know why they're going and do the little fish cake? Because
Mhm.
I started them the fish and bread.
Yes.
So they're getting when they getting up 3 o'clock in the morning to put in that time to do that, to prepare the stuff, come and get the thing here. Then they got to continue there so they could hit the road for 8 o'clock and catch their customer and hopefully catch some new ones. And day after day, that there's that grind, and depends on the spot and how much they sell, and whether it's fish and bread or fish and tennis roll or puri and whatever, or sandwiches. It is the amount of energy and devotion that our people are putting in for very, very meager or maga returns.
Right.
Look, 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 look. Guyanese are not asking for palaces. They're asking for what is fair, what is right, what is just. Given our context today, if oil at $80 a barrel and we producing 113.5 million barrels for the first 6 months of this year, what's gonna happen if it got to 60?
Hmm.
What's gonna happen if it got to 70? What is gonna happen? Well, Exxon got a sweet deal here. If you hit some big oil somewhere in Africa or in Latin America, and therefore the demand for ours got competition. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so we don't produce and sell 113. I mean, the appetite for oil is almost insatiable. But the fact is, I'm saying we're at $80 a barrel and we can't get nothing out of it. And you're then turning around and insult me, insult the Guyanese people by saying, well, look how much we do for you.
Yeah.
There's how much more you want, right? I mean, this is what it comes down to, whether it's poor Indians, poor Africans, African Guyanese, or indigenous Guyanese, or mixed Guyanese. The fact is that people, let me start with this thing about struggling. People are suffering in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
They are agonizing. They are living in anguish because they're frightened for face the man across the counter. They shame
Yeah.
because they know their hand short. They know they don't have what it takes. And when they go today, they're gonna buy less. And they go tomorrow is less they can buy with the same money.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is the reality of Guyanese. And I think the president and the vice president and the minister responsible for something got to do with money. These are not stupid people. They are not stupid people. They have to have more than a fair idea. They have to have a very good idea of what they are doing and how it impacts the ordinary, the run of the mill citizen, the man in the street, the woman in the street in Guyana. And yes, we have the few, which I call the less than 1% in this society, that are living like emperors and mandarins. And we have the rest of people living in the grass. We live, we are struggling to make ends meet. In the irony, in the injury of a country that is deemed quite rightly the richest per person in the world. Well, I mean, we don't want to live. I don't think there's any Guyanese that wants to live like Kuwaitis or like people in the Gulf. They're throwback, and we get people from the region for come and shine we shoe and wash we car and all them kind of thing. We want to have what is fair and what gives us a sense of belonging, a sense of participating, a sense of being involved in our wealth, in our God-given endowment. And that is not happening. It's not $25,000. It's not $45,000 for because we care. It's not $3,000 more for pensioners per month and telling you, well, we've done all these 50 so much percentage in the past 3 4 years since we've been here. No, that the numbers pale when compared to where you're spending on brick and mortar, where you could thief money and buy and shaft me again, borrow more money, $5 billion US billion dollar now, which is a trillion Guyana dollars, right? Which is 1 trillion Guyana dollars we got in debt. And who got to pay the back? Not the next this generation and the next one. And so we are getting hit more than once. And our leaders are just I think there's this depraved indifference to where Guyanese are. Guyanese are crying.
Yes.
Guyanese are screaming.
Yeah.
We need some justice. We need some help. And to your point, people don't like to talk about this. They don't want to hear about this because it brings shivers up their spine. But it is also reality. Where is this disparity? Where there's inequity in the sharing of the national patrimony, whatever form that takes, copper, bauxite, whatever, and especially oil. It is just those are among the contributors that leads to ruptures in society that are usually not reparable.
GHK Lall here this evening, and my brother, thank you very much for coming through again and sharing your perspectives with us. It's been quite a show that we've been able to tease out a number of issues here today, especially this issue of this enormous growth in the first half of this year, and our people, the majority of them, are not seeing not even a percentage of that growth in their life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your closing thoughts as we go out.
Well, I think we need to thank Dr. Ramcharan for putting that conversation in the center of the table and dragging our attention to it so we can address it. Democracy versus shades of autocracy. I think that there's something to sum up GDP. 49%, 113 million barrels of oil, only half here. Why has it not meant something for me? Why has it not done something for me? Why has all of those fabulous numbers not made a difference in my life? Hundreds of thousands of Guyanese, that's their grief, that songs on the wind and nobody in charge is listening. That's my closing comment. Good night. Thank you for having me. Stay well.
Thank you very much, my brother. And to your audience, as usual, thank you all so much. We've got to become smart. We've got to put people in government who understand the plight of the people and who are committed to doing something. This can't be politics as usual. It can't be. It can't be politics as usual. And generally we vote politics as usual, you know? We vote for the party that we grandmother vote for, we grandfather vote for, etc., etc., etc. And I am not opposed to people voting for parties of their choice. But it can be voting just for the sake of voting. We've got to be clinical. There are some people, some leaders who care about what is happening to ordinary people and want to use government to do something about that. To do something about it. Every cow cry for your own calf. And generally, our politicians don't cry for the calf. I think that's part of the problem. That what's happening with our people is a statistical thing. You know, 10% for the teachers. What the hell does that mean for the teacher? Go and check out the life of an ordinary teacher. Every cow must cry feed calf. And our politicians don't cry enough for their people. Because if they cry, they will fight. They will fight. When a union leader can go and sign a 10%, that union leader should not be a leader. Sell your people down the drain. For what? We have got to start getting smart and using our votes intelligently. Intelligently. You can't vote as if all is well. All is not well. All is not well. All is not well. Some of us pay attention to the lives of ordinary people. Some of us still do. I do pay attention. And it hurts. It really hurts. It really hurts. I used to stop, stopping with people selling that they'll trade because, you grow up, you go, David, oh God, I can't take money from you. Go for buy mango, I can't take money, take this mango. And it used to bother me. And some people still do it. But I try my best to say to them, no, I understand. Give me a makeup, but don't give me it free because I understand. If you sell all this mango on this tally, the most you carry home is a $3,000, $3,000. You can't watch people punishing like that. And it's politics as usual. You can't. You can't. Those of us who know better must do better. Those of us who know better must do better. And this thing has to stop. And if we, the political people, can find a way to stop it, the people going to find a way to stop it. The people going to find a way to stop it. And when they find a way to stop it, they all going to call them all kinds of names. But the punishment that people are going through now is too much. It's too much. It's too much. And this government has gotten too big for the boots, the shoe, the buckler, and everything. And this country, Guyana, has to make up its mind. Are we going to carry that shitty burden on our shoulders for much longer? It's too much. We can't. And we shouldn't. I'll see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Yes, tomorrow. I'll see you all tomorrow, where we continue to organize and mobilize and get ourselves ready to do something about this nonsense that is going on in our country. I can talk for African Guyanese. I've never seen African Guyanese take this kind of blows for as long as they've been taking it. And I know nothing is wrong with us. I know it's the same water we drinking and the same blood that runs in our veins. This is too much. It's too much. Human beings not supposed to live like the way the majority of Guyanese are living in our country. No, we are not supposed to live like that. We are human beings. And we have to stop playing games with our lives. This lot in power got to go. They have to go. I am for a national government. But before we get to a national government, we have to get rid of this unruly government. I'll see you all tomorrow night.